From holding the record for the fastest knockout in UFC history at 5 seconds to being on a horrible losing streak that doesn't seem to end, things are pretty rocky for Jorge Masvidal, and his next match just might end his career. He won the BMF title in 2019, and he wants to show the world why he earned it. People who care about Gamebred have been sticking very strongly by his side for the past 2 years, and trust me, it's been pretty hard for them. Even with his recent losses, the UFC has given him another chance to fight Gilbert Burns, who's a strong contender.
Now going for the armbar, he's gonna finish this, and there's, he's got it, Gilbert Burns!
Fans thought that Conor McGregor would fight Masvidal, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Chael Sonnen recently jumped on the hype train to give his 2 cents on the fight. He believes that if the American fighter loses this fight, his career could quickly start going downhill. It's pretty obvious that Masvidal's career may be on the way down already, since he's no longer in the title fight, but is instead in a co-main event. Yikes! But he knows deep down that this fight won't make or break his career, since it's not being billed as a big event. He's sad for his fellow fighter because it looks like he's just going down in ratings.
First time in my career, and it's in front of all my people, my family, my friends, so it hurts. I've never been knocked out in 50 pro fights.
He started out in the title fight, then he starred in a main event, and now he's in a co-main event. He just keeps playing lower and lower on the card. Sonnen has a lot of experience in the field, so he knows a lot about it. When it comes to big fights, he knows how much is at stake and how much pressure there is. This fight between Masvidal and Burns isn't likely to make or break Masvidal's career, but it could still be his last. After all, Masvidal has a lot to lose in this fight, which is why fans are super excited about the match and super afraid at the same time. In a previous interview, Burns said that the UFC tried to get him and Masvidal to fight a couple of times, but the talks always fell through. Fighters who are willing to take risks and do things that others won't are usually expected to keep doing those things. Talk about pressure. Gamebred is pretty disappointed though. He was pretty excited to fight Conor McGregor. And then Dorino has shown many times that he's a tough fighter who is willing to work hard and make sacrifices that others aren't. He might have even gotten a match against the BMF champion because of how selfless he was. As the fight between the two is getting closer and closer, people are getting more and more excited. Plus, the event is going to be a banger. The match is set up to happen at UFC 288 in April as the co-main event. In the welterweight fight, Gamebred will be fighting for the first time in over a year, while the Brazilian's coming off a convincing win over Neil Magny at UFC 283. Just look at their previous fights. You can understand how much trouble Masvidal is in, and Sonnen knows it. It's pretty obvious to him that Masvidal is a famous fighter, but Burns is a top contender and he won't back down. Again, having Masvidal be the co-headliner is a sign of bad things to come for the poor guy, but we have to give him credit where it's due. He knows that this fight won't help him get ahead in his career, which is pretty sad. Again, Masvidal has lost his last 3 fights, twice to Kamaru Usman in championship bouts, and once to Colby Covington, who he hates, while Burns already has a pretty impressive win under his belt. This made him rank 12th overall in his division, while Gamebred is just 1 rank above him. The Brazilian is pretty sure that a win over Masvidal will put him in the running for the title, so he has nowhere to go but up. Sonnen isn't the only one who has an opinion on the fight. Daniel Cormier thinks that Masvidal needs to win his next fight. The commentator has said that the upcoming fight between the two will make or break their careers. If Masvidal wants another chance at the welterweight belt, he needs to prove that he is still one of the best fighters in the world. So it's pretty obvious that he has to win this match. There is no other way. If he loses, no one will think he has what it takes. He won't compete with the best of the best. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to win a fight since he beat Nate Diaz in 2019. Also, the current welterweight champion, Leon Edwards, and the BMF champion have been fighting for a while. Edwards just defended his title against Kamaru Usman, so if Masvidal wins his next fight, they're likely to fight each other again. You never know. The worst part about all of this is that no one seems to think Jorge will he'll win the fight. Why? Well, just look at his stats. Gamebred is 38 years old now and has a professional MMA record of 35-16-0. He fought Colby Covington at UFC 272 in March of last year. Covington knocked him out in round 5. The fight was named Fight of the Night in the welterweight division, which meant that both fighters got a bonus after the fight. He hasn't won any fights for so long. Even his record is kinda spotty. He won 16 of his 35 fights by knockout, 2 by submission, and 17 by decision. This gives him a 52% finish rate in his 35 wins. With all of that, he lost 3 straight fights. Yep, in a row. He had a pretty good start, which is why fans are super devastated. His first professional MMA fight was against Brandon Bledsoe back in 2003, when they were both on the regional circuit. He got off to a good start by beating his opponent, who was a pro MMA fighter with a record of 6-7-0. Since then, he fought 21 times in the UFC. He was even Ben Askren's first real opponent, and he beat him by knockout at UFC 239. Before the fight, Askren had never lost a match. He was 19-0 before that. Gamebred knocked him out in the first 5 seconds and earned Performance of the Night. I mean, it's still one of the most famous knockouts in UFC history, but that's where things went downhill. His next match was the last one he won. He beat Nate Diaz in 2019 at UFC 244 and won the UFC BMF Championship belt. This was his first fight for a UFC title, and he knocked the other guy out after going at it for 3 super intense rounds. He hasn't done well since then. His first attempt to win the UFC Welterweight Championship was at UFC 251 in 2020, but he lost to Kamaru Usman. He even lost his second attempt to win the UFC Welterweight title at UFC 261 the next year. He was brutally knocked out. Then came his fateful match with Covington. It happened at UFC 272 in 2022, and he was knocked out in the 5th round. So if his performance is any indication, it doesn't look like he's going to win this next fight either, even though he has knocked out 16 people throughout his career. There's no doubt that he's a great fighter, but sadly, it looks like his best days of fighting are behind him. Chael Sonnen believes that, Cormier believes that, and by the looks of it, so does the rest of the MMA community. Well, there you have it. That's all I have on why UFC 287 could be a potential career-ending fight for Masvidal.
Thank God for this amazing journey. I come from a very humble place. I'm in front of all of you here. This is amazing. This is mind-blowing, you know?
Jorge Gamebred Masvidal.